Welcome to More Than a Few Words Marketing Conversation. This is your host, Lorraine Ball. And those of you that know me, you know I love a good story. No presentation should start without a story. No long blog post should ever use anything else in the introduction. I don't always get to do that, but I do love it when I do it myself and when I see other people do it as well. And so today we're going to really dive into this whole topic of creating stories and defining the difference between story building and storytelling. To have that conversation, I've invited John Elbing to join me. John is a business storytelling consultant. He is the creator of the story building method, and he's written a new book on the subject. There'll be a link in the show notes where you'll be able to find it. But in the meantime, John, welcome to the show.
Hi, Lorraine. So thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here and to talk about my favorite subject.
Well, I am excited to have this conversation. And I really want to start with a definition, if that's okay with you, because you do not use the terms storytelling and story building interchangeably. You really see those as two different activities. How do you define that difference?
So I feel that storytelling has become a buzzword where it's all about tips and tricks and how to make your story nicer, paint, add a nice coat of paint and make it cute. But it doesn't really mean which story do you want to tell? So I called it story building on purpose to sort of say, before you figure out, should you start with a hook? Should you do this? Should you stand straight? Should you do all this kind of stuff? It's which story do you want to tell? And for me, you're telling your customer's story. You're not telling your own story. So you really take their standpoint. My company's name is Standpoint because you have to take their standpoint, tell their story to get them engaged in how you can help.
I had somebody on who was a guest who said that if you're the hero of the story, you're telling the wrong story.
You bet. The customer is the hero. You're the guide there to help them be successful. They're Luke Skywalker, you're Yoda. It's
Okay, so you know that the story is going to be about your customer, about their successes, about the role that you play, but it is in their successes. How do you start building that story in a way that assembles the right information, weeds out the things you don't need to have in there, and really creates a coherent message about you and your brand?
So in this story building method, the idea is I've sort of feel that when we encounter a brand for the first time, we go through 3 steps in our mind. And if you can tell a story that brings the person through those steps, it'll be a natural way to bring them along. And I find a lot of companies skip the first step and skip the last step because they all, and so for me, those 3 steps are recognition. When you meet a brand, you sort of have to recognize yourself in the brand. If you don't know for who it's for or what, they sort of say, hey, we do this stuff, but you're not really sure, you have trouble to engage. Or if you feel that they're targeting someone else, even if it could be fine, you go to a landscaper and you feel that it's for companies and not for private people, where you're going to just skip. So that first thing, it's really important to feel, if I go onto a website thinking, we have services for independent consultants with gray beards, a cat that live in Switzerland, I'll think, ooh, I'm interested. Even before I know what they're offering, because I recognize myself and they think, ooh, they work with people like me or companies like me. Then there's a step. Okay, go ahead. But
I was going to say, I love that. I love that idea. And I think it's both in words and in images that you can create that story point connection as you're kind of using your story everywhere. I was reminded we were dealing with a fertility clinic, and all of the pictures we were finding were these blonde mothers with little blue-eyed babies, but that wasn't representative of the community that we were in. And so the first thing we did was we took the photo to black and white, and then we zeroed in on the mother holding the baby about mid-level. So no hair, no facial features. And it was an amazing way to help people recognize.
Yeah, that could be me.
That could be me. Yeah. Okay. So we've got recognition. Now perception.
And perception is this idea that you have to really understand. So it sort of starts emotionally, where you don't necessarily know why. You walk by a cafe and think, "Ooh, I want to go in there." And then, but here, so part of it is you have to be clear. You don't want to be, funny or clever. You really want people to understand. There's so much out there today that differentiation is really important. Why are you different? And the other thing is a kind of thing around category. People want to put you in a box. What do I compare you to? If I don't know if it's this thing and I'm not sure what it is, but if I say, oh, that's like this, that helps me position the thing. And if you can be strong in that category, that's even better. I like to say, I've asked 500 people to give me 3 brands of energy drinks. People say Red Bull, then they hesitate, and some of them say Monster. Well, I'm in Europe, that's another one. And very few can give a third one. And there are 192 energy drink brands out there. And Red Bull has 50% market share because they own the brand. And so if you can be different. If you're one more doing the same, but if you're saying, usually people do it like this, but hey, we do something different. So that differentiation and category is important. So then I'm really excited. I think that's really for me. And then that third part is projection, where I think, what's it going to be like? And often they don't bring you that far. So I sort of think, oh, well, how is it, I have to buy it and install it and learn and then try and use my old system while I'm starting the new system and the thing and the stuff. And I end up by saying, okay, I really need to do this, but I'll come back next week, and then I don't. So if you in the story can say, hey, this is how it happens, this is the experience you'll have, and then, imagine these problems that you'll no longer struggle with this, and close your eye and imagine this positive future that I promise. And if people can already sort of pre-live what you're selling, they're one step further into engagement. So at the beginning, if people recognize themselves, you'll get better clients. It's really the people that match what you're doing that will connect. So you have a better quality pipeline somehow. But then you bring them a little bit farther by having them really, they're already, involved. And then they say, okay, then I'll get the demo, I'll get the meeting, or even purchase or whatever.
I love this process that you're talking about taking customers through. Because, at the very beginning, you said, well, this is all about, the story is about the customer, but really taking someone from a point of bumping into a brand they don't know and recognizing it's for them, building an opinion very quickly about what it is that brand does, and then seeing how they work with, how they could work or how they would live as a result of that. And that's all great. And I love that in theory, but can you give me a simple, maybe example of how a company might actually frame this?
So say I mow lawns, and I can come to you and say, hey, I can mow your lawn. Or I can say, homeowner, they would love to live in a really nice environment. When they moved in, they were so happy, but, keeping, that, their garden is a mess, but when they get home from work, they're tired and they never get around to it. So they're, you're ashamed of your yard. But we have this great system where we come in and we take care of everything, and then you no longer have to worry. Your spouse stops nagging you. And imagine you'll be proud of your yard in front of your neighbors. You'll have the best barbecues, all summer.
Absolutely. I love that. That's a really good example. And it was a really good way for me to visualize how that could work with a particular industry. So if I'm going to go through this process, anything else I should keep in mind as I start building my story?
So in the book, what I've done is I've created a number of canvases where you put Post-its. So there's one about your customer, and you think about what are the segments, who are you targeting, what are their aspirations? And aspirations sometimes can be very practical. I need someone to mow my lawn, or it can be, hey, I want to feel like the hero. I want to be successful. And you can play around with these aspirations. And often companies say, I offer this service. So the problem must be that they're missing the service. But no, you can if you really take their standpoint, you can feel that, oh, this is the way to say it. So I go through all these questions. At what moment is it the best to talk to a customer? there's these trigger moments. I get a phone call that says, "Are you happy with your insurance?" And I sort of think, "I don't know," and hang up. But if they say, "Hey, we saw that you just bought a house, and we know we're sure you have the basic insurance, but did you know we have this great thing?" I think, "Ooh, I'll listen." So if you can pick those moments. Anyway, so you go through these canvases, and there's a framework where I have little squares, and you say, "What are these are these steps," and you build the story along those lines of recognition, and then what category, what the service is, and then the experience, and then this projection into the how it makes your life better, and then you can make a website, you can make a pitch deck, you can at a cocktail party you can have the short version, and say, "Hey, instead of saying I do this, you say these people have this issue, and this is how I make their life better." And even in that short version, that's way more engaging than say, "I'm an accountant." No.
Absolutely. Because let's face it, being an accountant is not that interesting.
Well, no, but it could be. Small businesses struggle. They're working with their clients, but all this financial stuff is complicated, and they leave money on the table with their taxes. And so I work with them, take it over, and at the end of their year, they get tax rebates, and they're ahead of their thing, and they know where their money went, and they can manage their business, and they're more successful.
Fantastic. Well, John, this has been fabulous. I'm going to encourage anybody, if you guys are listening and want to know more about what John does, his website is standpoint.ch. You can also find John on LinkedIn. Look for John Elbing, Elbing, and you'll find him there. And there'll be a link to where you can find the book in the show notes as well. John, thanks again for being a part of the show.
Well, thanks, Lorraine. This has been great fun, and I'll love to listen to it when it comes out.
Fantastic. And for those of you listening now and looking for other marketing resources, or maybe this conversation prompted an idea in your head, hop over to morethanafewwords.com/contact. Leave me a message, or better yet, leave me a voice note. I'm trying to collect a few of those for upcoming episodes. This has been another episode of More Than a Few Words. Thanks for listening.